Okay, I'm going to give you the update on what's happening in Germany in relation to prostitution and the coronavirus. As you can imagine, it is bad, but how government responds now matters, can make a difference, can at least make things slightly better for most women. But if you don't want to hear something that's going to be mainly depressing right now, don't listen to this video. Instead, just go to the links down below, where if you have some money to spare, you can donate directly to aid for women in prostitution. If there are more funds of this kind, I'll post them there right now. It's just two. One for two women, one from Brazil, one from Bulgaria, who are living in an apartment together. And the other one is for women in Berlin street prostitution, who are hit especially hard, as you're about to hear. Well, what's happening is that as everything is being shut down, which is the right decision, best to my knowledge, as a response to the virus, that means prostitution is being shut down. That means every non-essential business is being shut down, and brothels are considered non-essential. So to summarize the situation in Germany, it's tricky because different municipalities and areas of the country are handling it differently. Some places only brothel owners are being criminalized right now, fined if caught. And this whole finding thing to me is always like, I don't know, is it going to become the cost of doing business, or will it actually stop them? That depends on how lucrative continuing business is right now, I assume. So some places just the owners, some places it's the women in the trade. And again, many people don't know this, but women in the trade being fined is not just a thing that happens during a pandemic. This happens during regular times as well, because there's specific zones all over the country that are designated as no prostitution zones, but prostitution still happens there. Then women are fined, and as you can imagine, the women who are in those zones are the ones who have the least knowledge of their legal rights. They may not even know that they're not supposed to be there in some cases, etc. And again, the denial of women's vulnerability leads to them being unfairly punished, because the idea is that they know exactly what they're doing, they know the legal situation, they know their rights, they know they're breaking the law, and they choose to do this. And then there's, best to my knowledge, just one city that is explicitly also criminalizing Johns. It's not the legislation I want because it's criminalizing the person in the trade, but at least they're stating that, there's another person responsible here. There's a person making a choice here, and that is the John who keeps on buying, despite the risks to the woman and himself. So currently we have patchwork laws of this kind all over the country. Most of them are working on the base assumption that being in prostitution is a choice that you can rescind at any time, that you can stop and take a break from. That's not a problem, right? Because it's a job like any other. So all these women have to do is apply for government help, or just live off their savings. Now it turns out the majority of women don't have any savings. That obviously includes the women from Eastern Europe, Northern Africa, South America, and Asia who are being exploited here in legalized prostitution. They don't have any savings, but actually turns out that some people who are advocating on the pro-prostitution side, who would be considered privileged, I'd be hesitant with that word, but others might use it, relative privilege, are actually struggling too. Yeah, that includes the escorts who charge a four-figure number, who are now on Twitter saying, actually, I don't have any savings either, and I'm going to have to ask my friends for funds. I'm going to have to go to the government and ask for money. Now, some women can do that and ask for money, because in front of the law, they're considered self-employed, but that only goes for those who have registered with the government, which is about 33,000 of an estimated 200,000 to 400,000 people. So only those who registered with the government can apply for benefits. Everyone else, for the past couple of years, has been in the illegal sector. and is not going to be eligible for support, may not even be in the country legally. I know everyone and everything is making Corona something political, is making it about their agenda. I think, what other time is there than now? Because this is a political issue, and this is affecting a whole group of people specifically because of the system that they're in and the way that it's set up. This is the right time to politicize this issue because women in prostitution are objectively exceptionally vulnerable. That's a naked man on top of you and inside of you. That's not like hairdressing. That is exceptionally risky in terms of risking infection. It's like that in non-corona times. Just now, corona is another thing that he can give to her. Because women can't leave, because it's not a choice. And all the people have been saying, well, as long as there's no pimp beating her, it's not exploitation. For the love of God, right now is the time to take an honest look and see that a lot of women can't leave. Even a lot of the pro lobbies saying, actually, women can't leave. They have to keep working. This criminalization is not going to stop them, because if they don't do this, they have nothing. Now is the time to acknowledge that if you can't stop working and if you can't apply for benefits, no, it's not a job like any other. Not even close. A lot of women's immune system is compromised because a lot of women in prostitution are sick, because prostitution makes women sick, causes injury and illness. And this is what people who are abolitionists and people who are pro-prostitution and in contact, who are social workers in touch with women in the trade, is saying. The majority of them, there's two things that are happening. Either the pimps take them, the managers, put them in a car, drive them home, put them on a train, take them home to their to Bulgaria, Romania, etc. Or they're still sending them out there. They're still standing on the street corners or sitting in the brothels, apartment brothels, because women can't leave, because it's not a choice. If you have no alternative, it's not a choice, and that is the reality of many women, and right now, it's more obvious than ever. And just here, kudos to those social workers, not just in this sector, in a variety of sectors, who continue to work because they realize if they don't do this, people will die. I have, the last couple of years, tried to understand and see what makes sense from the arguments of the pro-prostitution side. And the way I understand it, that what people who are actually in prostitution and support legalization or decriminalization, what they're coming from is the idea that the focus is on what is going on in the mind of the person who, for example, is sitting across from a woman in prostitution or formerly in prostitution, let's say a night out with friends, or on a date, or as a potential future employer. What image do they have of her? Do they view her as damaged, traumatized, broken, a failure, stupid, uneducated, etc.? And the hope is that if you normalize prostitution and rebrand it as sex work, that the image that people will instead have, oh, well, this is an individual who's doing a job that is important to society, that requires specific skills, who has something to offer, who is actually quite smart, is an independent businesswoman, etc. And I understand if I had to choose between those two, how I'd rather be viewed, I'd obviously choose the latter. The problem is, you can't start describing prostitution in this manner as long as it's not true for the majority of women. And I'm going to prioritize talking about what kills women before I talk about what it's like for them in a job interview, on a date, or out with friends. All things that are also important. Hopefully, potentially, we can do both. Destigmatization and not romanticizing the industry. But if I have to prioritize, I'll prioritize this. I'll prioritize writing to my government and saying, hey, the situation's not okay. Things need to change. Otherwise, lives will be lost. And the fact that this must be the priority politically just became really, really clear. And suddenly the pro-prostitution lobbies agreeing with this, writing on their websites about how women have no money, how women are facing homelessness or already homeless. Our government tried to at least fix the homelessness problem by making it such that if you're a brothel owner, the brothel rooms cannot double as apartments, so that when she's not making money for the brothel owner, that she doesn't become homeless. Unfortunately, there's the problem that this didn't fix the issue, because what a lot of pimps did is they just rented a postal address that is actually not an apartment. It's just a place to deliver mail to, and pretend that this was where the women were living, or they made women pay off not just the exorbitant charge for the brothel room, but also for an apartment that the woman never got to see. So that's the bad side. That's how this law didn't fix the problem. But the hope is that this at least will make it slightly easier to prosecute a brothel keeper. But as we're seeing now, a lot of brothel owners just flat out refused to comply with the law. And they're now saying, well, actually, we've got a bunch of women here who have nowhere to go. Taking this as one example in an article speaking about the Pasha in Cologne, it's a brothel I've mentioned a bunch of times. It's one of the biggest in Germany. It was built by the city government. There was a woman murdered there. There were 2 murder attempts there. There were adults and children trafficked to this place. It's still open to this day. And right now it's making no money because they're doing that much compliance with the law. And the brothel owner said that he'll graciously let women continue to live there because otherwise they'd be homeless. By which he's actually admitting that he broke the law and these women are homeless and have nowhere to go. But he can present himself as a savior, because isn't that great? He'll give them a roof over their head. And yeah, in an interview, the mega pimp who owns this brothel actually said a lot of these women come from poor countries in Southeastern Europe. They can't afford to go home. They literally don't have the money to travel home. Again, for context, this is a brothel where the women pay €160 per day for their room. €160, which is an insane amount. That means that they have to be available to somewhere between 6 and 12 men a day to make any money, depending on whether there's another person, like an outside pimp, not just the brothel owner, another pimp taking money off of them. According to the article, a single woman has to be available to about 100 men per month and makes about €5,000 in total. That is before anyone takes money off of her. Now, if you have 126 rooms in the brothel, that means that, not including drinks and any additional charges, the owners make about €630,000. Now, from this, they do have to pay a few people, like security and such, but not the women, curiously, right? This is like one of those so-called jobs where you pay your boss. He doesn't pay you, you pay him, but it's not considered exploitation, these exorbitant amounts. With the insane amount of revenue that you can make from a mega brothel like this, no way in hell doesn't he have the money to pay for their train tickets. Some countries, the borders are closed, but some time ago he still could have sent them. If he really cared, he still could have given them the money to enable them to go home to their families. He didn't. He's keeping him there, and he'll have a reason. Like, excuse me if I don't trust that he suddenly developed this strain, a giving, caring strain, yeah? In a brothel where women were murdered despite security, despite the cameras, where all kinds of horrific crimes have happened. Excuse me if I don't believe that he's doing this for mere charity, out of the goodness of his heart. Now, this article says, like I mentioned, the women are independent contractors, so they're not getting any money from the brothel owner. He, though, the guy who owns it, can apply to the government for aid. Isn't that fantastic? So the woman in prostitution at brothel, she's not going to get any support from the owner. The people who will be paid from this aid is obviously the guy himself, cleaners, hairdressers, security. In many cases, this is literally a mafia boss paying off his crew. Okay, what are the conclusions that we can draw from this, that we should draw from this? Maybe just a quick note, there is a little bit of a silver lining. Many women who have successfully left prostitution said that it took a an exceptionally bad or traumatic event for them to be able to take that step and say, I'd rather risk the challenges, the severe challenges that come my way trying to exit than have this happen again. Unfortunately for many women, that's either that's financial destitution, that's getting pregnant, wanting a different life for the child, or it's a near-death experience. Now, there's some hope that the crisis will enable some women to leave, but they can't do this on their own. So like I mentioned, if you want to support women, get food, get shelter, travel home to their families if they want, get into a women's shelter if they want, exit if they want, make sure to click on the link below and give what you can. Unfortunately, this is literally, there's no meaningful government funding for support because we've kept up this lie that women don't really need help, that they're no more vulnerable than any average person, that they experience no more violence than an average employee. If we learn one thing from the COVID-19 crisis, I beg you, let it be an understanding that prostitution born of poverty can be just as coercive as when a pimp is breathing down a woman's neck. Many women right now are stuck in brothels exposed to disproportional health risks. Prostitution always has been exceptionally dangerous and detrimental to women's physical and mental health because of the men who profit from the industry and those who make use of it. COVID-19 just makes this so obvious that even the pro-lobby is acknowledging women are stuck and in danger. We're having an overdue discussion on predatory landlords right now, as many people fear evictions during COVID-19. What is every tenant's worst nightmare is the everyday reality of many women in prostitution is that you have to be sexually available to a male, sexually aggressive stranger to feed, clothe, and house yourself. Any law approach that denies the vulnerability of the majority of people in prostitution, and that actually includes a lot of the comparatively better paid women who are themselves saying that they're struggling right now. Any law approach like that is bound to fail them, especially during a crisis, but during normal times as well. Some people have said that the conditions we're seeing now is what it would be like under the Nordic model. That is completely incorrect, because the Nordic model would not include a criminalization of the person in the industry. And the buyers would not disappear suddenly, but gradually over time, so that if there is enough political will, as the buyers fade, then their numbers go down, the number of support services goes up, and then also the incentive for pimps to bring more women in or for anyone to enter the industry goes down, because it's just less profit. It's true that Johns have more power over women now, because if a woman now calls the police, she herself will be fined for being in prostitution and being a threat to public health. So those are the medieval situation that we have returned to, which is not what it would be like under the Nordic model. Under the Nordic model, if she called the police, she herself would not be criminalized, and they would be more likely to believe that she was a victim of a crime, because they have an understanding of prostitution as a system where a lot of violence occurs. As abolitionists, we have to learn a lesson from this, that exit services are really, really necessary. Some people have actually reacted with joy to this crisis, as in like, oh, now all these buyers can't go there anymore, right? And women can start over. They can't, a very few, rare, small number can start over by themselves. A lot of them are going to need support. This is going to really have to be the core of our campaign, to build these support services so that women are not left in a ditch. One other thing that I wanted to add, because we're talking about this drainage of jobs, like the decrease of men making use of the industry and women being even more desperate and competing even harder, it's important to mention that as the system of prostitution is set up, every woman, or almost every woman, unless she has an elaborate ad campaign, will, with time, experience a decrease in Johns. That is when she is no longer the new girl, the fresh meat. Not my choice of words, but what some Johns use. Or as she gets older, unless she has a lot of plastic surgery, but even then, or as she gets sicker, visibly sick or sicker, the number of Johns will decrease. So the issue of Johns decreasing is an issue that we have to face either way, no matter the law. This is just like, what if most Johns disappeared except for those who are exceptionally reckless because they're willing to risk their own health by a potentially deadly virus on top of STIs, etc. What if this happened in a matter of weeks? There were no support services, and the women also were criminalized. That's the situation we're in right now. No matter the intentions, as we can see, many of the obligations of an everyday worker are transferred to the person in prostitution through legalization or decriminalization, as in paying taxes. Sometimes they don't even know they're paying taxes. It's just taking off of them. It's just part of what they pay to the brothel owner. All in all, the situation we find ourselves in is that the obligations of a normal job in many ways apply and burden the person in the trade, but the benefits just don't materialize. Because if I'm a policymaker and someone tells me there's no difference between prostitution and hairdressing, if I shut down the hair salon due to a pandemic, I will shut down the brothel and not think twice. But it's always good to blame the Nordic model. That would be acknowledging those vulnerabilities, even when it's not the legislation of the respective country you're talking about. So again, I might like to know what's going on in the listeners' respective and the viewers' respective countries in regards to the situation. What is that you can do? I just recommend, if there are funds, give what you can. If there are none, set some up. If you know someone, if one of your friends is in prostitution, ask them if they're doing okay, if they need anything, and write to your lawmakers to make sure that the people who are still in prostitution right now literally have no choice. And it is, at least in this crisis, that much should be obvious. So if you have the time and energy, please write to your lawmakers, ask them to give support. And even if it's not a lot, every life saved matters. And this area needs special attention right now, more than ever.